Good evening, Commissioners. The item before you in item number 7 is a series of applications to construct an addition to the Mount Olivet Careview home at 5517 Lindell Avenue South. The proposed addition is just over 36,000 square feet and is a 5-story addition on top of an existing building component. The required applications include a conditional use permit to expand an assisted living facility or board and care home, a conditional use permit to increase the maximum height in the R5 district from 4 stories or 56 feet to 5 stories, 69 feet, a variance to decrease the south interior side yard setback from 13 feet to 6 feet, and site plan review for the building addition. So the site, as you'll note here, is outlined in black. It comprises the entire frontage of Lindell Avenue South between 55th Street West and 56th Street West. The proposed project, again, includes an infill addition over an existing single-story section of the building that connects, we'll find a better shot here, that connects 2 wings of the current building. So as this is drawing here, the Mount Olivet Careview home is a skilled care facility with 153 beds. Of those, 137 are long-term care beds and 16 are transitional care beds. And the site also includes 94 units of assisted living. As part of the project, the 5-story addition would allow the applicant to convert some of those 2-room or 2-bedrooms to single beds and allow for more single beds in the facility. So the overall number of rooms or number of beds on site is actually not changing as part of the project, even though the building bulk is significantly different with what they're proposing here. So the infill addition is located in this area here. I don't know if this is showing up very well. Located here between 2 wings of the building. I don't know why this isn't drawing for me. So the scope of work outlined here, this being the addition that extends back this way, above an existing single-story component. And then they're also proposing some changes to the loading and parking area on the back side of the building. Right now, a lot of the loading, as I understand it, for the use actually occurs in the right-of-way, or the maneuvering for the loading occurs in the right-of-way in Garfield Avenue South. So with the proposed changes, they are improving the loading dock situation on the back side of the building and have submitted turning movements that show that turning movements for delivery vehicles, garbage trucks, and the like can actually now be accommodated on site instead of in Garfield Avenue South. So as part of my presentation here, I think I'll focus mostly on the conditional use permit for height and then the variance for the side yard setback. So the applicant is proposing to increase the height beyond what's allowed in the R5 district from 4 stories, 56 feet to 5 stories, 69 feet. Here are the building elevations. So you can see what's in gray here is the proposed addition. This being the Lindell Avenue elevation, and this being the east elevation of the building. Staff finds that the proposed height would not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity, nor will it impede the normal and orderly development of the surrounding area. The height is proposed in the center of the existing building, filling in a gap between 2 building wings. The proposed addition is approximately 22 feet from the nearest residential structure. As a point of clarification here, the nearest residential structure is actually also owned by Mount Olivet. So this home here is owned by Mount Olivet, has been for quite some time, and is currently used as an in-home daycare facility. Instead of being used as a residential structure, it actually probably functions more as a commercial daycare facility instead of a residential use. So the closest residential structure not owned by Mount Olivet on this block is actually 69 feet away from the proposed addition. The increased height is not expected to increase traffic congestion in the adjacent streets, as the number of beds in the facility is not changing. The amount of space between the properties helps to mitigate any potential impact of the increased height. The applicant submitted shadow studies of the existing conditions and the proposed, showing that there are no significant shadowing impacts with the proposed addition. That's primarily due to the fact that the existing residential uses that are adjacent to the site are southeast and east of the property, which in and of itself minimizes the shadowing impacts proposed here. So here's the proposed addition. You can see the shadow studies starting at sunrise, 1 hour after sunrise, and you've got autumn, summer, and winter in this. Here is the noon shot and the sunset minus 1 hour shot. Again, autumn, summer, and winter. The addition will not impact the view of any landmark buildings, significant open spaces, or water bodies. It's worth noting here that the evaluation done here under the CUP for height is taking into account the fact that staff is actually recommending denial of the side yard setback variance, which will allow for increased separation between uses and a more adequate transition area between the addition and the residential uses on the remainder of the block. So going back to the site plan here, the applicant is requesting a variance to decrease the south side yard setback from 13 feet to 6 feet, and that's that side yard along the common property line between the Mount Olivet Careview home and that residential structure that they own to the south that contains the daycare facility. Pull this up here. For this 5-story building, the required setback is 13 feet. Again, that's based primarily on the height of the addition. The applicant is proposing a setback of only 6 feet. Staff finds that practical difficulties do not exist in complying with the ordinance in this circumstance, and there are no unique circumstances to justify the request. The subject property is over 2 acres in size and large enough to accommodate additional square footage while complying with the setback requirements. While the impacted side yard is a shared property line between 2 properties that are currently owned by Mount Olivet, we have no way of guaranteeing that that residential structure will be owned by Mount Olivet forever. They have proposed putting some sort of condition either on this application or even recording it on the property with Hennepin County, requiring that they never sell that property. That's not something that's really, not something we can do as part of the variance request or any of the other applications before you. We can't require that they own the property forever. So again, the site is large enough to accommodate it while complying with the setback requirements. That 5-story addition within 6 feet of the property line would certainly have an impact on the access to light and air that the adjacent properties receive, which is the intent of the setback requirements in the zoning code and the comp plan. It would not allow for adequate separation between uses. For board and care homes or assisted living facilities, there are specific development standards. One of those specific development standards actually requires an adequate transition between this type of use and uses of lower scale or lower density residential uses. And a 6-foot yard does not meet the intent of that transitional space that's called out in the specific development standards. The portion of the site where the addition is proposed currently serves as that transition space. So right now this is single story in this space and then kind of parking loading area on the east side of that existing single story space. So right now that is kind of the transitional space, and allowing this to go within 6 feet of the property line would really have more of an impact on the adjacent properties than requiring them to comply with the 13-foot setback. Finding that that would be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity and impact the character of the surrounding area. Looking at the site plan review, there are a few items that require alternative compliance. One of those items is blank walls on the south and east elevations. I think it shows it better in color. So there are 2 sections of blank wall. The one on the south side is really on the upper floors of the building, not very visible. It's really adjacent to another wing of their building. The one on the east side is a little bit more substantial and highly visible from Garfield Avenue South, so staff is recommending that that wall be broken up. Another item of alternative compliance is the even distribution of windows. That's related to these arched windows on Lindale Avenue South. You don't see those arched windows anywhere else in the building, and it kind of doesn't comply with that even distribution requirement, so staff's actually recommending that those be squared off or that the arches be removed. There are some landscaping items that require alternative compliance. One relates to the number of shrubs required. Staff is asking for a condition of approval to require that they comply with the minimum number of shrubs. This is drawing very slowly, my apologies. There's another condition of approval related to the landscaped yard between the parking area and Garfield Avenue South. They are asking for alternative compliance for the screening requirement in that location and the screening along the south property line. And staff is recommending that they comply with those in lieu of granting alternative compliance. Other conditions of approval, under item A, you'll see that staff is encouraging the applicant to prepare a campus master plan. That's something that is found under the specific development standards for other large campus type uses. It's not a requirement for a boarding care home or assisted living facility, but this is one that's been before the Planning Commission many, many times since it was originally constructed. And these applications are coming forward kind of piecemeal. And so we're encouraging the applicant and the property owner to consider doing a campus master plan to provide some level of transparency both for staff and for the neighbors, and to also require them to start thinking a little bit more comprehensively about what might be occurring in the future and to communicate that a little bit better ahead of time as far as they're able to. And that master plan is something that we would keep on file here and encourage them to share with the neighborhood as well. So other conditions of approval are pretty standard here, related to rooftop mechanical equipment being screened and the recording of the conditional use permits. I also wanted to note that there are several items of correspondence in your supplemental packets today. That's essentially a form letter that was received from several neighbors, but each one is personalized a little bit. One of the things in that letter is asking that we continue the application one more time today to allow the applicant additional time to work with the neighborhood. This has been continued twice already. The first time to allow the applicant to work on some things that were missing from the application, and the second time at the request of the applicant to allow them more time to work with the neighborhood. If we were to continue this one more time today, we would not have enough time within our 120-day clock to allow for an appeal, if that were to happen, to play out at Z&P without an extension granted by the applicant. So with that, I'll close and can stand for questions.
Thank you. Kimberly, related to that setback variance that they're requesting, would it be possible for them to combine the lot that house is on into the parcel next to it? Would that somehow mitigate or eliminate the need for that variance? I assume that would also require rezoning that lot.
Right. So that lot right now has R1A zoning. There's not a lot of policy support for extending the R5 zoning on that side of the block in this location. Also, it's two separate structures, and the only way to have more than one principal structure on a lot, if one of them is a residential structure, is to do it through a plan unit development. So that would require an additional application on top of the rezoning.
Okay. Are there any other questions of staff? If there are none, I'll open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first. And yes, please state your name and address for the record.
Where are you seeing? Oh, on the side. Okay. And so you just come up. Yeah, for sure. David Walterstorff. I'm with WAI Continuum, the architects working on the project. We actually support almost everything that Kim and staff have suggested, with one exception, and that was the side yard. And we'd like to show you a comparison of what the proposals were and how it influences the neighborhood. And the neighborhood has opposition to certain things, so we wanted to actually make the neighborhood happier. And so by doing that, what we have in front of you is an example of a project that is the original, and if I want to move forward, how do I just click? So the existing structure, as you see it here, and this is a proposed with the side variance included. The shadow study and everything else is up. The other project here has the perspective of the back of the lower part, lower left, and the existing structure on the upper left, and then the proposed project as it relates to the side variance. The project, if we were to use this project, would allow, the state standards for care centers, which are nursing homes, are very, very strict and very, very intense to the square inch of everything. And so in meeting certain programs, we wanted to show, because Kim has not seen this, so we wanted to demonstrate to you the side variance request and what it does in a proposal, two different proposals. So this is the main proposal and how it influences or looks. And the next one, if it would move.
Wrong file.
Oh, it's wrong. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. Oh, it's fine. Okay. So the existing structure as it is, the same perspectives that we looked at, and then this is how the maneuvering area is working for the trash and other elements for deliveries. Another proposal, just to show how it would work if we met the side influence, adds 15 feet toward Garfield to the building, meeting the same program elements that the state requires, and comes up almost parallel on the backside with the home. So it really doesn't allow more air, more light, and we feel that the scale of the building is not as good as the prior scale was. So it actually hinders the project by pulling it forward for the staff or for the residents in the neighborhood. They don't like it, so we're trying to keep it away from Garfield. It also shows us that we can't maneuver without turning the trash 90 degrees, which now faces it out toward Garfield, even though it has fences and doors. It would still have to be open for the trash and things to be removed. In the other proposal, it does not. We actually turned it 90 degrees away from the neighborhood so the neighborhood would be happy. And I hope you guys are neighborhood. So we're trying to satisfy the neighborhood as best we can and still create a positive influence for the residents of the project. Because included in that light blue area that you see up there is a rooftop walking garden for residents all, and there's a very creative therapy area for all residents to improve their health, included in the project. So what we would recommend is are suggesting that maybe staff review and yourselves, but that the side variance be allowed because it actually improves the presentation to the neighborhood. It improves the massing. It actually improves the air and scale to the overall building. And it actually is a very, very positive thing. So we wanted to demonstrate that to you. And that's all.
Okay, are there any questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers. Who would like to go first? Yes, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Graham. I live at 5523 Garfield. I have lived at that house for 25 years. And as Kimberly pointed out so well, Mount Olivet and Careview Home has come asking for variances in building several times, and that's probably been one of the biggest frustrations living on Garfield and with Careview next door. I know Kimberly mentioned that there was several letters sent with regards to the general feeling of the neighborhood. So they've asked me to kind of represent, so I'll be the only one speaking here on behalf of the neighborhood, I think. Okay. Apparently Megan's got something to say. So, but anyways, I not only represent just the Garfield, but I also represent 55th Street and some of Harriet, the people that are affected generally by it. We're a pretty tight neighborhood. We like to be involved in, and I think one of the biggest disappointments we have is that it was really at the 11th hour that we were informed that there was actually any construction going on. So the fact that we were asking for some time to actually look at it, we did have a delay from the last meeting till this meeting, just so that we had some time to actually meet with Careview and Mount Olive themselves, and then as a neighborhood. So as we talk about some of the concerns with regards to the neighborhood, there's a pretty common thread that goes along with everyone. And the first one is really the impact of the home values in the neighborhood. I mean, we've seen them continually add structure to the building. In 1990, when I lived there, I moved in just before they added, I think, the first addition. And since then, it's grown. And when you look at these pictures, these drawings up here, they don't do the justice of sitting on your front steps, looking out as across the neighborhood. And it's unfortunate I don't have any pictures. I actually have several pictures I could show you if you wanted to see them. But anyways, we're concerned with the value of the home. And although it's really difficult to say what the impact's going to be, I think we can, there's other places in the city that have dealt with situations like we've been dealing with, and we could probably understand what that impact would be. In talking with very skilled and knowledgeable, real estate people in the city of Minneapolis that we know, the preliminary findings have been to us that it will have a negative impact on the overall property. I don't think it can help not have an impact to that. They talk about the shadowing of the 5-story building, understanding that, the shadowing, we have a lot of different ideas on where it's going to actually truly impact. We have people here that live directly across the street from it, and the shadowing does exist. And probably on top of the shadowing, there's also just the simple fact that you had a 5-story building, across the street from you. You just pretty much lose your view. The sun, looking at the sky, all of those things that add to the quality of living in your home. Another thing that we have is just in general, the personal privacy of the residents who live on the west side. My streets east and west side of Garfield, so they would be on the same side as the Careview facility. Adding that building, and we talked about that variance there, and building it right up to the house and just for a correction, it's not a daycare center that's next door, it's rental property. And it was a daycare center many years ago, but it's no longer a daycare center. That's one of the conditional use permits they actually applied for, to move the daycare center into the Mount Olive Careview home. So that is actually rental property. So now they're looking at adding a variance to that. Speak with my hands here. And like we said, we can't ask them to own the home forever. So how that's going to look, and even if they did get the variance, the house is separated by the next house by a driveway, and so the proximity to the other houses. I mean, it's to have a 5-story building sitting right there on top of that. As you go down a couple of houses from there, those individuals will be basically sitting in a fishbowl for the building to be watching them. So those are kind of those are feeling type stuff, and I understand that. I think probably one of the biggest things, although those are important to us, as we talk about being able to give them the personal use permits for this. I think probably the biggest thing, and the reason why I'm standing here today, is that I've stood here before and I've asked what are the consequences for not adhering to conditional use permits, and the answer that and who's in charge of policing conditional use permits. And the answers that I've gotten have been that it's the responsibility of the neighborhood and to the people to raise the concerns. And we have raised the concerns for 25 years. The situation in the first conditional permit that I was involved with was in 1990, and the concerns that we had then are the same concerns that we have today. We have garbage trucks that come in every single day. They come in at 6 o'clock in the morning. They got their backup beepers going on. We have semis that are on the street. We have semis that are going in and backing up. We have all kinds of things that, for their all practical purposes, the business end of the Mount Olivet Careview home is on Garfield, which is a residential street. They actually have property they own the property on 55th. They own property along Glendale. They own property along 56, all of which has no residents, if you will. And yet they continue using the business end of their, having the loading docks and the deliveries and all those things, and everything that happens and all the activity that takes place for that facility happens on Garfield. And we've tried working with them, and I'm not going to say that, Mount Olivet Careview have been, horrible to work with, because they're not. And I do understand the barriers that they have, with trying to police things, but it's really not, it involves our quality of life, living on the street. We have, I can go on, it's like I kind of lost track of what I was trying to say here, but, I've got 7 conditional use permits that I have on file here that talks about parking issues, talks about truck delivery issues, it talks about garbage trucks, it talks about time of day, it talks about all those things that just happens every single day that impact our lives, and they don't get resolved. Promises that were made by Mount Olivet Careview Home to address the parking issues, have meetings with the neighborhood, those types of things to try to keep things moving, and keep the relationships going. They don't happen. The fact that we weren't even engaged until all of a sudden there was a notification that we have a meeting here today. And this is a huge thing. This is going to forever change our neighborhood. And again, going back to conditional use permits, why have a conditional use permit if there aren't any consequences for the lack of adherence to them? I don't understand that part. I just don't understand. So as we talk, as far as the neighborhood goes, we are very much in opposition to building a 5-story building on our block. Inside of, we look at the conditional use permits and, that are written here, and there's nothing that has anything to do with the neighborhood. I was very impressed to see with the last presentation the involvement with the builder and the neighborhood, and to me that's what represents a good neighbor. And I'm just after 25 years, I am so frustrated as a homeowner. The impact is living. I don't go out front very often just for the sheer fact that it's not what I perceive to be my neighbor anymore. So, what am I missing? Megan, you ready to talk? So, okay. So I think most of all, just in closing here, I'm very unhappy with the fact that conditional use permits are given without any, retribution for lack of adherence, the fact that we weren't engaged, the impact with the height, all of those types of things. And so I appreciate your time, and I'm going to pass this on to Megan now.
Thank you.
Sure.
And please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Megan Cox, and I live at 5519 Garfield Avenue. My house is probably the most directly impacted next to Michael and Jim. They have the most direct impact, and I just want to give you a sense of what some of the impact is. That's the negative and injurious impact to the community. If it pleases you, can I just turn this around and play it very quickly? A video that Michael took at 6 o'clock in the morning. On a regular business day, 6 o'clock in the morning, when a trash truck was coming up. Hold on. There we go. All right. That is what he sees from his bedroom window at 6 o'clock in the morning. Did you put the sound on? But there's no sound on this one. We have another one that has sound. Okay. This is 6 o'clock in the morning. And I can't understand how that is not injurious to the neighborhood. The same issue is noise. That would also be a part of this. Again, just an illustration here that helps to convey the point of not necessarily complying with the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan, of making sure that we do have transitions that are appropriate for our neighborhood and convey the character of the neighborhood. If you look on DHS's child care license lookup, there is no license for 5522 Garfield Avenue, which was purported to be the family child care daycare home. There is no license there. The licenses are held by 5517 and by 5601. So again, that is a family who's living in that area, and then a family directly next to them that are going to be impacted and actually have put up their home for sale, the direct house next to the rental property, partially as a result of this. So just a couple of other pieces. I did also want to applaud the previous developers who were here, who did provide a lot of feedback from the neighborhood and planning. And I would like to request, if possible, for some additions, if this does go. Obviously, I am speaking against any of these approvals, but if this does go forward and comments continue to illuminate other pieces, I would like to recommend that an additional number for site plan review, D, would include the requirement to work with neighbors on the property, as well as CPED staff, to approve what would be something that would be the character of the neighborhood, so that we would have some impact on what our neighborhood would look like. I would also like to include some sort of condition and guarantee that we would have some memorandum